Okay, so we talked about dominant, creative. Now, when we're talking about creative, I said ISTPs are probably not going to want to go clock in to an office and spend the 40 hours in an office 9 to 5. However, there is a subtype of ISTP, which is the normalizing subtype, which probably is the ISTP flavoring most able or likely to do that.
Yes, they are the most likely, but still they have ISTP preferences, so nobody's going to... I mean, none of the ISTP subtypes particularly loves clocking in and clocking out.
Sure.
But this is the subtype that fits pretty well into general society. There's less of a sense of, a lack of socialization. These ISTPs tend to be, pretty well socialized and have a decent time engaging and interacting with other people, even though they're still introverts, just like the dominant, right? They're still introverted types. And so they might not be the life of the party, but they're going to have like a capacity to interact and engage in a pretty decent way. They are usually experts in a specific trade. That is the normalizing, this is how I am a good member of society, right? I'm doing my civic duty by being very good at a specific trade and developing strong expertise there. And basically, it's done by taking everything the senses brings in and kicking it to the back of the brain for thorough consideration. So they're the most thoughtful of the ISTPs. And ISTPs already have a tendency to be fairly thoughtful type. This is going to be the most thoughtful of the 4 subtypes. They have a lot of language-based reasoning. They also have a lot of physical skills, which is unsurprising. They tend to be the most step-by-step and linear of the ISTPs. They check their thinking as they go at a slower pace. This is how they build that expertise. And they are attracted usually to conventional service jobs that require a lot of technical skill because they are able to master the intricacies of these kinds of jobs. And if they can use their hands or move around, all the better. They don't have to, but that's ideal. So you can see them in careers like becoming an accountant, an athlete, a biologist, a computer programmer, garage mechanic, lab technician, nature photographer, web marketer, like any of these things that require increased levels of expertise and being very thoughtful as they set the situation up. And what's interesting, and this is, every time we go through these subtypes, I'm like, I wonder what this subtype is mistyping themselves as. I think it's for, the dominant ISTP, I'm like, I bet they think they're judgers. And then for the creative ISTP, I'm like, I bet they think they're intuitives. For the normalizing ISTP, I'm like, I bet that they think that they are judgers as well because of that capacity to stick with something and be so thoughtful and be linear. That said, the thing that sets them apart is they are way more likely than a judger type to have a side hustle, right? You were talking about before using things like Uber as a platform.
Yeah.
This is really unique to ISTP normalizing subtype, is that they're the type most likely, even though they're normalizing, to have a side hustle, like be an Uber driver or a bicycle courier on the weekends or something to that effect.
Yeah. So there's moonlighting for this subtype, the normalizing.
Yeah.
So normalizing, again, plays well with society more than the other subtypes, most likely, because there's so many opportunities in our current modern world to go get that job, to clock in, clock out, be a part of that system. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just how some people are wired.
Yep.
The chemical or the neurotransmitter that's associated with is serotonin, the normalizing subtype. How does the attunement or, function look, the two dominant functions, the dominant and copilot or auxiliary function, how do they look for an ISTP for this subtype?
Okay, so the normalizing subtype is the opposite of the creative subtype. So in this case, it's going to be the judging function of introverted thinking, in this case accuracy, that's going to be the analytic. So that's the one that's more focused, targeted, and more tied to how the world, the judging function is tied to how the world should be, and there's usually more of an ability to focus and make things happen, along with our core principles or values. And so that's going to be the more analytic for this kind of ISTP. Whereas the perceiving function, in this case, extroverted sensing, or what we call sensation, that's going to be more holistic. It's going to be a little bit more open framed, a little less certain, or insistent on its own experiences and perspective. And this is what makes it so that this normalizing ISTP has a capacity to bring in so much sensory information, and then it's very thoughtful about that information. And that's where the expertise comes from, is the ability to not be so assertive with that extroverted sensing, like the creative type that needs to travel and needs to get out there and collect a lot of information and be do, or doing.
Yeah.
This is more of like I can gather that information with my senses, sort of be receptive to it, and then do a lot of precise thinking around it. And so the creative ISTP is going to be more likely to be have ingenuity and make these really interesting, creations, whereas the normalizing is a lot more likely to be an expert in something, an expert technician.